I need one of you guys to do me a favor. Somebody look up how many sunspots we have right now. Can somebody do that? We didn't make it, by the way. We didn't make it. It's very unfortunate. We did not make it. I was hoping we would. We did not. Somebody do me a favor. Look at the number of, I want you guys to look at the date, 3/28, 2024. If you would, please. Will I help you guys out so you can get the right data here? I know I'm a quirky person, but I want you guys to see this, to understand this. Okay, let's see. We are looking at, wait a minute, let me mute something here. Receive feedback. Big time. Oh, we didn't make it. Come on, don't do this now. You guys know what's happening right now, don't you? Anybody know what's happening right now? We have a couple of problems. We do. Let's see. Was that amazing? Well, 327, 41, number of sunspots, 41. 326, number of sunspots, 53. 325, number of sunspots, 63. 324, number of sunspots, 54. Sounds random, right? 328, number of sunspots, 40. We did not make it at all. Not one bit we didn't make it. Okay, so if you guys heard me last night with Pastor Paul, just kind of emphasizing some solar problems, bad solar problems. Right? Yesterday, you guys do know we had, I believe it was detected yesterday. I'm looking at, we had a detection. A few, not just one. We had a couple, actually. Quivers coming off the sun. Right? A couple of issues with the sun. And there you go. Somebody hit the number right on the head. There you go. 39 to 40. Yeah. 39 to 40. We have some issues happening here that affect the earth. We're talking about the earth. Although it would be so nice if that weren't the case. The sun is about to change it. It's in its process of changing its polarity, you could say. But so is the earth, for some odd reason. It is not fully known why the earth is doing the same thing. But it's happening. Since in the last 20, 30 days, we've had some major electronic instabilities surrounding the earth. They've not been stable at all. In fact, today they're doing emergency maneuvers on a few satellites. Today they are. Which means that's because the Earth's magnetic field was no longer protecting a certain area. And so they had to do a few maneuvers concerning the Earth. If you guys have low volume, I'm up as far as I can go. I can't go up any further. I'm stuck where I'm at right now. So hopefully you can adjust your volume a little and fix it. I can't do anything here. I can't do a thing. The whole system, all the audio for some odd reason took a turn to the left. It did. Now that could have been us doing development, or It's just one of those things with electronics. One of those things. Somebody says volume is great. That's good to hear. Anyway, so I was hoping we'd make it through the 40 days for about 10 reasons without major incidents from the sun. That didn't take place. In fact, it's almost like it waited until the 40-day mark, which was a calculated date, just so you understand that. It was a calculated date of activity of the sun, and I was hopeful we'd get through the 40 days without activity on the sun. That's only one part. The other part has to do with witches. But back to the sun. We didn't make it. In fact, right at the end of the 40-day mark, the sun started doing its wicked shimmy, right? So if you look at the solar charts, you'll begin to see solar activity picking up right there at the end of this 40-day mark, right? Now, you guys can accept or not accept what you want to hear, right? I normally, when I track things, right, I don't do the theoretical thing. You should know that by now. All of you who have been in COT. I don't spend time on theoretical things because we have very real issues we have to deal with. We have real issues we have to deal with. And so when dealing with dates, activity, we're looking for feedback, right? Hoping that no feedback comes, but looking for feedback. So it's more of a precision type of hunt we're doing, right? Based off a lot of data. In this case, the estimations and the hopeful estimations did not work out. The sun reacted to something that nobody's going to talk about, right? Nobody's going to talk about what the sun reacted to. And believe it or not, the sun is very precise in what it does. It is. The sun is not doing what it's doing randomly. And if you guys have been listening to COT for a while, there's no way somebody can predict any solar activity outside of 30 days, 60 days. That just can't be done, right? Unless the sun is more precise than most people have figured out, okay? The sun is not some random ball of gas. It just does things, randomly. That's not what's happening here. And all of you guys, right, you guys who have been tracking some of my talks and quirky dates and things of that nature, you should know this by now, because you cannot predict. You cannot predict the activity of the sun that far out. Just can't do that, right? You can't do that. So in this case, the sun reacted to something, and I was really hoping it would not, because that would give us, a little more time at least. Well, let's just say a little more security of time. But it didn't. It did not. Which means, in comparison to what we have seen, we are about to see the sun for the first time, begin to erupt with some pretty high numbers, pretty high values, pretty high impacts. Okay. You guys know about the 28th, the 28th, and more than likely today is just not over yet, but the 28th, the closing of this interval. You know about the closing of that interval that we set in February. It is now closing off, and unfortunately, the interaction space between something nobody talks about out there and our sun, that interactive space is now beginning to react quite a bit with our sun, which is unfortunate, because what that means is, although there's some things that mainstream scientists don't understand. They have no grip on yet. There are some things in the sun that physics does not explain, like why the Earth, or why the sun, by the way, flips its poles. They don't understand that yet. They don't understand that process. Physics cannot answer that question, right? Can't do that. The interaction, this interaction, you're talking about some phenomenal forces that will continue to grow. The hope was we were still in the safe zone, right? Still outside this interactive area between something out there nobody talks about, that we were still outside of a specific zone that would not affect our sun in a big way. Right? These subtle and small changes that are happening in the sun, these reactive, predictive reactive phenomena on the sun, is a direct consequence of something that nobody talks about, and which means that this last period was a real telltale type period, right? Because it's almost as if he'd waited until this last mark, which was a lip above some pretty high charges that affects both Earth and the sun. We were hoping it would pass. If it did pass, if we had minimal or standard solar activity, that meant we would have at least, a couple of more years to not endure some of the more massive changes in the Earth, right? Because we did not. There are a slew of predicted times that the sun is going to be quite volatile concerning the Earth. Most of those sunspots, by the way, see, as this solar cycle continues, just in case you don't know, as it continues, the sunspots gravitate towards the poles to the equator, right? They normally do that. They gravitate from the pole to the equator. This allows scientists to come up with their little butterfly charts and read those charts. You know how they track things. They like graphs. It's actually a good way to see over time some of the energy output of the sun, what these solar cycles are actually doing. In this case, things are becoming too predictive. Too predictive. The energy output from the sun is over the mark. Solar activity is well before the activity we're seeing now. We're not supposed to get until 2025, according to trending, according to recent activity of the sun, which means the perturber out there, I'm going to call it the perturber out there, is closing in on our sun. As it closes in, right, those intervals get shorter and shorter and shorter, and everything becomes premature. Everything. All these things we've been looking at in Revelation. Every single last thing we've been seeing in Revelation, right, is not absent some of the volatility of the sun. Now we get to see the reality of these things. People have had a hint of some of the activity, but we've been highly blessed that we still have communications, that we still have, comforts. As time continues, we're talking about 2024. I can't even look past 2024. I can't do that. I'm focused on 2024, no other day. 2024, the activity is just beginning. It is mathematically, it is increasing in a way that puts us near a peak target date too close, and too close. That means our weather phenomena is going to be greatly affected. So is everything geological. And we've been seeing some massive changes in the Earth geologically, right? Areas that have been dormant for a long time are no longer dormant. I suspect this trend will continue, but it will increase in intensity. Right? The intensity will increase. And it is unfortunate because it will cause some unfavorable conditions to all of us. Now, we're not talking about the end of the world, but we could be talking about the end of power for nations. Right? That would be just not so good. I know a lot of people, they really think that, you're only going to have a large-scale power outage through an EMP. That's wrong. That's very wrong. Just so you know, we have a band around the Earth that is electrical. It is highly charged, right? In the absence of that band, all these high-speed particles, the first thing you're going to start seeing is the auroras. They're going to go worldwide. Worldwide, right? When they go worldwide, Air Force is going to have they're going to have a daunting task on their hands to salvage as many satellites as they can. You guys do realize that the GPS satellites are owned by the U.S. Air Force, right? You guys know that. The Air Force satellites are owned, or the GPS satellites are owned by the U.S. Air Force for the entire world. For all of us. For all missile guidance, both enemy and friend. Just so you guys know this. If we start losing the GPS satellites, it will affect everything. That means blind missiles, blind navigation, blind everything, right? Air Force has a very intricate job, very demanding job. It's an hour-to-hour job. They have a target list of a lot of things they have to meet a mandate every single day, or it's all for naught. With the changes in the sun, with the changes in the magnetosphere of the Earth, and it goes hand in hand. As we get more and more turbulent, and we're talking about in no less than a week, there are going to be some turbulent areas in the Earth in no less than a week that will no doubt affect the job of the Air Force, communications on the Earth, power in certain places of the Earth. Quirky things will begin to happen on the Earth in less than 1 week. Not 4 months and 5 months and all this kind of stuff. No, this is a very immediate issue that will continue throughout the year. Throughout the year. The anomaly, the southern anomaly, is growing at a very alarming rate. An alarming rate. All of a sudden, it starts expanding. All of a sudden. As of 2024, probably last month when maybe a couple of weeks, maybe at the beginning of February, it began to grow too much. And there are telltale signs this thing is growing. And so you have these no-go zones in that anomalistic region that are now, they're being marked, and it will reflect upon air travel. It's going to reflect on everything because it's growing. The deal is that areas are losing the protection of the magnetosphere. Right? It's going away. It's going away. That's going to be a big trouble spot. Just so you understand this, if we have a weakened magnetosphere, right? If we had zero solar flares, no solar flares, listen, no solar flares, but our magnetosphere was weakened to about 10% of what it is now, it would be a Carrington event every second. Do you guys understand that? That means equipment that's not plugged in will start running. Equipment that's plugged in will burn up. That's what that means. That means no GPS. And without GPS, calculations on Earth cannot be made for other automated systems. That means your computers are not going to work. Your computers operate by a clock, which can be highly affected by magnetic changes. If the timing in your processors is off, your computer's you're going to have flip bits all over the place, and you're going to have zero calculations. None. That means everything you tried to save is going to be nothing. And in the Bible, did it not say that the rider is smitten with madness and the horses with blindness? Now, we don't ride horses, but we do use vehicles. In today's world, a horse would be a vehicle. If the horse is blind, it cannot navigate. Correct? We don't use horses right now. We use vehicles. Vehicles navigate by way of GPS. A blindness of a vehicle would be no GPS. None. That means something happened to the mission of the Air Force and Space Command where they absolutely failed. Right? They fail to maintain those GPS satellites. If the vehicles cannot see, missiles cannot see. The only way a missile can see, and this has been a big rush, just so you now understand this, right now, or it has been, as of late, that missiles were guided, even self-guided missiles were guided with GPS. There's only one way to guide a missile outside of GPS. Does anybody know what that is? Artificial intelligence. That's the only way. Through second-to-second observation of the terrain, of identification of every object it sees. So why do you think there's a rush in getting AI into armaments? You're starting to see it now. Because it's almost as if somebody suspects GPS is going to fail. You're starting to see it now. Why would they put AI navigation modules within military vehicles? Maybe they suspect GPS will fail. All your favorite GLONASS and all these different types of GPS are not going to work out too well. Why? Because our magnetosphere is going into a chaotic state. And the sun is building its interactions with something way out there. And it's happening now, not later, but now. Most people are not going to be aware of this. They won't pay attention to it. I'm just telling you what I know. They're not going to pay attention to it. They're going to try to do everything to explain it away until it takes them. Until it absolutely takes them. Right? This means many things will increase in the earth, and there will be telltale signs you'll be able to see. One of the telltale signs you need to watch out for are global auroras. You think something will be wrong if you start to see auroras all over the globe. Not just the standard, we got overcharged, and now you can see the northern lights in New York or someplace like that. No, global auroras all around the earth. That'll be a telltale sign. That'll be a telltale sign of the change in our magnetosphere. We are going into the chaotic activity of the magnetosphere. It'll seem solid first, as it is right now. Then it will abruptly and continuously change. As it changes, radiation is going to leak right into the earth. It will affect everything. It will. Everything. Also, there's going to be a lower dependency on the precision of most calculations. Let's go ahead and face it. The world right now utilizes computers for precision mathematics. The slightest error or buildup in errors and loss of checksums is going to cause some severe problems with all the systems. And this is happening, people. That this is real. This is not theoretical, nor is it made up. This is a real, this is the real deal. The auroras is one telltale sign. Right? I'm interested to see how they explain what the sun is about to do. I'll say it again. No one can calculate solar activity so far out, can they? Has anybody ever seen proof of anybody calculating solar activity? 40 days out, 60 days out, 90 days out? No. No. You'll not hear of anybody doing that. So how is somebody doing it in the first place? How's that being done? This is not to toot one's own horn. That's not what this is about. It's to get you to actually hear, to listen, to have an understanding that there have been some long-standing lies that seem so truthful, so rational, but they're not holding up. They're just not holding up. And the sun is a bit more precise than what you think. and it's really about to go haywire, they will not give you an early warning of this because they themselves don't have an early warning of this. And it's going to cost. It's going to be costly. Very costly. It will. When solar activity no longer follows trending, no longer follows what it has been following, and it's not trackable. So far it's been trackable. Now we hit the separation point. We're at that point where its trending is going to veer off from all charts. All charts. Somebody says there are predictable patterns. Solar minimum and maximum, right? While people may think that is precise, it is not. There's a gap. It is a plus or minus 3 years. That's a big plus or minus. 3 years, that's a big plus or minus, don't you think? If you go back and look at solar minimum and maximum, you're going to find something. Not only a double dip in when it's at maximum, but you're also going to notice date inconsistencies. That's why they have to chart it out. That's why it's a trend line. There is a plus or minus 3 year tolerance with their accuracy. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not very accurate. 3 years, if you're measuring things over, 2,000-year periods, fine. 500-year periods, fine. But a 3 year tolerance, plus or minus 3 years, that's not very accurate, is it? That's the closest they've been able to come. How can somebody hit plus or minus 3 days? That's a bit better, don't you think? In the same area, they said is impossible to predict. You can't predict magnetic anomalies in the sun that causes sunspots, right? That's where the magnetics, let's say the magnetics of the sun start to build up, they cause cool spots. Now, when I say cool, I don't mean cool to the touch. It is still extremely hot, right? But that's almost like predicting where a sunspot's going to appear. Who can predict that? You're dealing with something akin to fluid dynamics, where you cannot see the inside of it, right? So there's pattern recognition. But then there's something else, which takes a lot of data points. A lot of data points. It also takes some components that most people don't know about. If you think the sun is just a big gas ball, you'll never get it. The sun is not just a big gas ball. It's not what it is. Man's arrogance perpetuates such nonsense. Man teaches man about God's creation. You think they'd be ready for everything, wouldn't you? So let me ask you something before it ever happens. Let me ask you this. Why were they not ready for one of the biggest solar events in modern day history again? Why did they fail to forecast the next Carrington event? I'm asking this before it ever happens, because it is going to happen more than once. So why did they fail to predict that? Why did they even fail to protect themselves? They're not going to protect themselves because they won't see it coming. Always remember this. You're dealing with objects your father made. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty. You're either going to believe that your father created everything, or you won't believe. It's going to be either or. For those who believe that their father created all these things, right? Please don't say he's a sloppy designer. He's very precise in what he does. Look at your body. We are impossible life forms. Everything on earth belongs on earth, doesn't it? It is adapted to earth. We are the only things on this earth that are not adapted to the earth. We're made of the elements of the earth, but in a way where we are non-adaptable to it. Don't you find that odd or strange? Then in the Bible it says you're in this world, but not of this world. Animals are clothed, right? Birds are clothed. Everything seems to have a tolerance for all the different temperatures around the earth, but what do we have to do? We have great sensitivity to changes in temperature. We have to do special things to eat. We do. We're prone to things that the average animal would just go beyond. We don't have a built-in pharmaceutical factory within ourselves like cats and dogs and other animals who can simply lick their wounds and they start healing because they have strong antibiotics in their saliva. We don't have that. We don't. Why? Because God made the earth and everything in it, and then he made mankind. You're created. A species different. To subdue this earth. Not to be one with it, but to subdue it. Caretakers, stewards of this earth. That's what you are. We don't do a good job at that either, do we? At any rate, in the near future, another Carrington event we will have. A few of them. Right? Now, our electronics are not like they used to be. Could an EMP take out everything, the power grid and everything else? No, it couldn't, because we build things differently. And EMPs, right? We use different materials in electronics. You know what that means? That the average iPhone is going to survive an EMP. That's what it means. Because of dissipation, because of your environment, because of what they put in the highways. That's why. Because of what's underneath the ground with the power lines, the secondary system. Not everything is going to survive, right? Not everything. These big switches and transformers, they won't survive. Small electronics. Some of these electronics are immune to being, overwhelmed with EMP-type pulses. They're immune to it. But there are many things that are not, right? They already have warehouses full of transformers underneath the ground. They keep them there because it takes 7 years to build a transformer from scratch. They know they're going to have to replace them. In Revelation, in the book of Revelation, the sun does a lot of damage to humanity. The sun is responsible for quite a few things. This secondary object in which the sun is reacting to, right? And that will become obvious because everything is going to happen in one direction. What if you guys saw sunspots pull to one side of the sun? That would be quite obvious, wouldn't it? If all the sunspots gravitated towards one spot on the sun, facing in a specific direction, that would make a big difference. Then you'd be able to see something has some pretty powerful forces out there, causing the sun to attracting forces of the sun itself. We'll likely see that also. These things you'll be able to see, but you'll see them in a time when the earth is already affected. And it can actually, a flip of the poles of the sun is one thing. When the earth has a pole flip, hear me on this. In the geologic record, when magma is moving, it has iron in it. When volcanoes erupt, iron is in that, the eruption. That material is mixed in and becomes part of the rock strata, right? So you can always tell the orientation of iron in those eruptions to see where the North Pole was. As you go down through the earth, you begin to see iron orientated in different directions. As you cut down through the rock strata, you're going through years of time. There have been a countless number of flips, magnetic flips in the earth, right? But within those bigger time regions, that could be 200 million years, this is by their calculations, there are smaller regions that dealt with extinction-level events on the earth, when whole groups of animals when continents had all their animals wiped away. And those were in 200-year to 1,000-year intervals. 200 to 1,000-year intervals. Which means when you look at all of that data returning, because it's in quite a good order to be able to track, almost like orbital rotation of something else. So it's not happening randomly. The cause of that is external. And whatever the cause is, it seems to be on a timer, because it happens not in random, not at random times throughout history, but very sequential times in history, right? An ordered time in history. Now, the only thing that happens like that is the effects from the sun dealing with material on the earth. And when you start tracking that, you can match changes in biology with the rotation of the sun. Same thing goes with eruptions on the earth. Major eruptions on the earth carry iron particles in them. That stuff has solidified, causing, mountains to form, this, that, and the other, but it has iron in it. When you start looking at these layers, you begin to see something like a large durational orbit of something else, causing this cyclical problem to happen ever so often. And it looks like we're right in the middle of one. Well, not the middle, the starting gates of one. They track the magnetic influences in the earth, right? And see if it was chaotic or not based on radiation that was absorbed in that rock strata. Same thing is happening now. As it turns out, our southern anomaly in the earth, right? The entire southern region of the earth at one point was burnt up. Not the northern region. The southern region was burned up. We're going to see that again, but they don't know what hemisphere is going to burn this time. That deals with how the earth is tilted when the event actually takes place. It will happen from the sun, but we don't know what season we're going to be in, right? We could be tilted towards or away from the sun at that time. Whatever region is tilted towards the sun, well, it's going to heat up big time. And we just don't know that. When you're going through the four seasons here on earth, that determines who's tilted towards the sun and who's not, right? There is a double wobble effect that takes place also. You guys have heard me mention that. That happens also within this cycle. And that double wobble has already begun. Do they hide the data? Yes and no. If you knew what you were looking for, you could go and extract the data from the internet. But you're going to have to do some hunting and some filtering, right? But yes, you can find it. You can absolutely find it. All the data you need, you can find. The problem is this. Whatever data you collected is always going to be dictated by the theory that you believe. That's the problem. So if you believe in a specific theory, you're going to discard certain gaps of data, certain types of data, right? If you start collecting all data just to see what picture forms before you, you start seeing the truth. But the earth is really starting to go through some things. Anyway, we did not escape the interaction of that thing out there with the sun. We didn't escape it. If we would have had solar activity at the 20th day or something like that, or outside of this gap of time, we would have been fine. We would have been fine. And yes, it does coincide with their dark worship. It does. It does. See, folks, listen, that's why people like those folks that look at the sun, like BP Earthwatch and folks like, and thank God for Pastor Paul, right? Because when you go back and listen to these guys who speak on his presentations, they're passionate about what they're doing, right? They're passionate. All of us are human, but they're passionate. And it is a blessing to have people who would actually go after certain subjects like that, because the average person won't do it. See, to go forward with information that nobody else has, you had to be pretty bold. You know that, don't you? You had to be bold. Folks can say what they want about anybody they want. But let me share this with you. If God puts something in you, do you know how many people will not let it out of them because it does not match what the world is saying? So you have to be pretty bold to go forward with what the Lord gives you, don't you? Especially when you don't have all the answers. Right? So when things are put together like that, they deal with subjects that are going to affect every human being on the face of the earth. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. Some of you guys have learned a great deal from these guys, too. That's another good thing, right? I'm mentioning this to tell you something. Always try to understand what the Lord is doing. Stay away from that realm of criticism. Stay away from that, because that will save you. There are people right now who have no idea of what's happening all around them. And they will suffer for it. They will. All of us have suffered at some point in our lives because we were foolish enough not to have taken certain precautions. Right? We were not good stewards over what the Lord had revealed to us. And we played around, took the easy path, and we suffered for it, didn't we? So we know we can suffer in this earth. There are going to be lots of people who suffer because in the time they could have absorbed what they needed. They didn't. They sought to entertain themselves. They won't escape the suffering. They could have taken things seriously. They could have prepared, but they didn't. Right? A lot of people ask me, well, Mike, you're different. You hit the top of the subjects. You never really go into depth. For what? Go into depth for what? God put people in place to go into depth for. It's not my area. But the Lord put people in place for just about every subject out there. And I do read a lot of negative things that people say about all of those folks, especially me. I read them a lot. But the negativity is almost like a person that does not want to know that a train is coming. Their car is stuck on the tracks, right? And a train is coming. And they just don't want to look at the train thinking that's going to minimize the blow. That's not going to happen. God will put something in the spirit of a person, and that person cannot shake it loose. They can't let it go. Do you know that? It is like fire that works up within you. No matter what you do, you're going to be brought back to that same thing. Try to look at people in that respect. Try the Spirit, by the Spirit. Ensure that Christ Jesus is involved. Don't get intertwined in a person's doctrine. Why? Because we all change. Not one of us is the same way we were 30 years ago. Not one. That's why I never waste my time criticizing anybody, because I know this. If a person truly believes in Christ, then Christ will raise them. That means they're not going to be the same person in the future that they are right now. That's what it means. They can talk all the doctrine they want to. So long as they believe in Christ, Christ has responsibility to raise them. That's why I don't criticize. I don't waste my time criticizing anybody. There are things I believe in right now. If the Lord continues to raise me, I'm going to change too. We will all change. We have that common ground in Christ, spiritual conviction. And the Lord has put plenty of people in place to educate his people on what's happening. Here's the problem, though. You have the world saying one thing, and you have God's people saying something else. And you have to decide what you're going to believe. That's what you have to decide. You should already know, I don't line up with the world. With their doctrine, their way of doing things are very convincing. That's your home of comfort, the world is. No matter what you say, the world is your home, it is your comfort. So that when you hear the world speaking of something, you're prone to take comfort in what the world says. When a person is giving something by the living God, right, it's going to be opposite. It's going to be so contrary to what the world is saying. You're going to have no confidence in it because you're not used to hearing it. And whoever brings that forward is going to have to be a bold one to speak against everybody out there and to take everything that goes with it. But if they operate by conviction, then they're going to see Jimmy Crack Corn inside continue. with whatever the Lord gave them, because they're going to be the first believer of what the Lord has given them. So then a small salute to those guys who operate by conviction, who go forward in the face of all those who would say all manner of evil against them, and that yet they go forward with what the Lord has given them. Hats off to them. I give no hat off to the one who reserves it, who won't tell anything. They have some things to work out, right? You guys know I come forward with some weird things. I'm just weird, right? Strange things you never heard of. Or things you heard of, but I explain them quite differently. Because when you operate by conviction, there's no way you can believe the world again. Doesn't mean the world is wrong and everything. No, it does not. But when you start living your life by a filter from the Lord, when he gives you that nudging, things will change. Somebody says, so then, Mike from around the world, do you think that going to Dallas for the event Pastor Paul is doing wouldn't be a good idea? No, I'm not saying that. It's up to you. When it comes to, listen, how many people, you guys remember I told you guys about what I saw of Dallas spiritually? The fires coming from beneath and above, right? Now, it has not taken place yet. Not all the way. So, just like those people God touched in times old and the people he touches now, sometimes you can get something, right? Whoever listens to somebody else who is given something by the living God, you're still responsible to operate by what the Lord has given you. Even when you hear something from someone else, you cannot operate by what somebody else has said. You have to go to the Messiah yourself and operate by the truth of what the Lord has given you. The Lord will let you know when things are unsafe, right? He will not speak by your paranoia. He will not speak by your fear. God will always speak by truth. So you're not going to have a bunch of feelings of fear and that be the Lord. That's not going to happen that way. You're not going to have a bunch of feelings of paranoia and that's the Lord. He doesn't work that way. God will always speak by truth. He'll always speak by truth. And when you receive anything from the Lord, there's a boldness that comes with it to believe it in the first place. That's what you watch out for. God speaks with clarity. You will know it through your bones, not to go somewhere when the Lord is speaking. The key is follow Christ Jesus, not men. Not men. Be a compliment to your brothers and your sisters in Christ. Right? Don't take anybody's word for anything. Go to the Lord and have the Lord instruct you. That way you compliment your brothers and your sisters. If you listen to mankind, you're going to interpret what they say by your own mind. That's not going to work out too good, right? It's not. If you compliment your brother and your sister gives a brother gives a warning he says, stay out of California, right? And so you have 1,000 people who move away from California based on what he said. And you have another 1,000 people who seek the Lord. And they say, okay, that's a true word. But we're going to go to California this year. The Lord will tell us when to go. Those people who went to California because they waited for the Lord are going to compliment the brother. Because when the time comes, when California becomes a danger, when God brings what he has given mankind to fruition, they're going to be given that unction to get up out of that place, right? Should it go that way? But the rest of the folks are going to blame that person and say, hey, you said California was dangerous, and so we moved for no reason. When you operate by your own, mental abilities based in the earth, conviction is not conviction, but fear becomes your conviction. You're going to mess up every single time. Think about the folks when I started talking about the East Coast being on the water. That hasn't changed, right? A lot of people got scared of the East Coast as though it was going to happen immediately. You guys remember that? Let me tell you this. When that event takes place, people are going to sit down and say, I wish I'd have known this 4 to 8 years ago. That's what they're going to say. I wish I would have known this at least 48 years ago. But they did know it 48 years ago. People always do that. I wish I had known about this. I wish I had known about that. But see, the problem is they have to learn to listen to the Creator themselves. God will send people that will tell you of His Word, but when it's time to do something, you have to be able to listen to the Messiah. Always remember that. They can advise you on what the Lord has given them as far as an overall event, as far as timing. You must be able to hear the Messiah. So then a major key is your obedience to what the Lord has given you. Just simply learn to obey what the Lord has given you. Not to obey what you think the Lord has given everybody else, but learn to obey what the Lord has given you. When I'm talking, for example, I may say something that's absolutely true, but it may be something the Lord did not give to you specifically. You cannot obey something the Lord did not give to you. You cannot act on something the Lord did not give to you. See, that way you're not fooled by any man, any person. Obey what the Lord has given you. If I happen to say something, and God has put that same thing in you, then obey it. If I say something, but the Lord has not given that to you, it is not for you. You see how that works? It's not going to be for you. Always remember that. There are too many people in this day and age that are fooling each other. They're causing people to live miserable lives. They are. A lot of people are taking full advantage of people. And I told you at the beginning of the year, this is the year when all those things in the darkness are going to be brought to the light. So all these people in fact, I said this, all those people you follow in the world, you're going to learn the truth of them. All those people you look up to in the world, you're going to learn the truth of them. They must be exposed, because if they're not, and this is not by other people, but by the living God, if they're not, then God's people are going to be fooled into following things that are already condemned. Time for us to see the truth. And unfortunately, that truth begins with understanding the nature of what we're about to go through. Yes, we're about to go through something. 2024 is a very revealing year. When I come back, I'll talk about more of that, because we have bad solar problems. We also have a magnetosphere problem in the earth right now. Of all the problems we could ever face, the sun and the magnetic field of the earth are of the utmost importance. If you can understand those two things, you'll understand quite a bit about what's happening. The hot days approach quickly. When the fires begin, the chaos will also begin, as it always does. When people get hot, they get irritated with power failures and rolling blackouts. These are the conditions to come, which is why I beg of all of you to understand what the escape plan is for your respective city. Do your due diligence. You should have a map, an atlas, something, so that you can navigate in the event. You know how many people get stuck in fires? I have no doubt in my mind that this year you could very well read of an article where 1,000 people were trapped inside of a fire zone and they could not get out. That's avoidable right now if people would just take the proper steps. and have an understanding of what to do in the case of a fire. The fires are coming. Fires are most certainly coming. But are you familiar with the place that you live in to know how to get out? Do you know that everybody's going to try to escape at the same time? When fires do break out, panic will also break out. You can't just come up with a plan, Johnny, on the spot right then and there if you're not used to operating in high-stress conditions or life or death conditions. Best to look at a map now. Don't turn away from it and say, well, I don't want to deal with that right now, because those people who say, I don't want to deal with this right now, they never deal with anything. And they're normally the ones hurt the most by these events. Don't be that person. Do your due diligence for your families, those you love, your friends. If you live in a high-rise and you say, well, there's no forest, well, guess what? What if you lost electricity in that high-rise? You going to sit there in your building and burn up? No. Know the exits. You'd be surprised how many people live in these places and they don't know all the exits. Children in schools, right? Can you believe that kids do not know where all the bathrooms are in a school? Do you know that? They don't know. They don't know where all the bathrooms are. And we're talking about kids who have been there the entire year, who've been there multiple years. They do not know where all the bathrooms are. They could know, but they don't know. Know the condition of the place you live in. Know the escape routes, the plans of the city. You should have one, especially this year. Especially this year. That's a personal responsibility. That's nobody else's responsibility but yours. When the fires begin, you guys had an example of Texas. You did. And thank God that was a flat region, very sparse. The vegetation was sparse, but it was still fuel. Have a plan. Whatever works for fire, always think of the water too. The floods are coming too. The floods are coming. Be aware of those things, so you will have dealt with them. Right? You will have dealt with them. You will have done your due diligence. No one moves into a house and never looks at the whole house. Right? When you go to sleep at night, do you lock every door or just one window? When you're going to secure something, don't you check to see every way of entry of a thief? Yes, you do. Is not that analogy used in the Bible regarding a thief? The strong man of a house, you know that goes for all of our situations. The strong man is that person in charge. Had he known the thief was going to break in, he would not have suffered. Right? Things to be unlocked. The irresponsibility of not checking the front door, things of that nature. Correct? Well, you're that person. And a thief is coming. And it will steal whatever it can steal. And that thief will be fire, floods, invaders, solar events, great hail. It'll come in many forms. Are you prepared for them? It's almost like the Lord is showing the entire country that we have a flawed mentality. We've had a border crisis for more than 100 years. Do you know that? We've had a border crisis for more than 100 years. Why have we had a border crisis for more than 100 years? Why are the Christians seeing it? See, when Christians see something, you better believe it's purposed. You had better believe is purposed. We have a border problem because the worldly, secular people cannot make up their minds on how they want to secure that border. And some don't want to secure the border. Now, if you leave your safety in their hands, you have no safety. Just like the Lord told us, the world is not going to make any provisions when the real deal comes. They're going to drop everything and go and hide. They will not help you. But the Lord has given us wisdom to have an understanding that the world will ignore everything until it kills them. And in a panic, they'll seek to save themselves. We're not to operate like that. We're to be good stewards, prepared, so that when something comes, we don't have to rush to do anything. We will have already prepared everything. The Lord is speaking through how many people? How many people end up saying the same thing about the sun, about the earth, about geology? Why are even the people that don't agree, they're still looking into the weather, they're still looking into volcanoes, they're still looking into geology? Who lit that fire in them? Isn't that funny? Even when you have this guy who's arguing with this guy about the impact of the sun, they're still searching for anomalistic happenings on the sun. They're still looking for these problems in the earth. Even though they don't agree with each other, they're still looking for the issue. What you should look at is these guys are looking for issues in the earth. Now, who lit that fire in them? You know who's doing that. Your Father's doing that. So you have all these people out there looking for the exact same thing. They may see slightly different from the other, but they're still looking for the same thing. Why all of a sudden are so many looking for it? And why all of a sudden? Because it wasn't like this for a long time. Now all of a sudden everybody is looking for that thing that's bothering them. You better believe something is on the horizon. Because if you don't believe it, you will not use your time wisely. People have played long enough. You're the ones that will experience the real deal. And that time is now.